Hello, everybody, and welcome into the MVP show for November 29th, 2020, post-Thanksgiving, going into the holiday season as well as NFL Week 12. I'm John Vicari, joined alongside by Dan Passante and Brennan Miller. Boys, I hope your Thanksgiving was safe, first off, and also fun. I know Brennan did not eat stuffing because we touched on that in the open last week, but Dan, what was on your Thanksgiving plate?
Stuffing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we were. It was different, people, but it was necessary for this year. So hopefully we can get back to normal. But yeah, it was good.
Brennan.
And you're right, John. I absolutely did not eat stuffing, and probably never will. So take that as you will.
Yeah, you're missing out. It's okay. Well, like most Thanksgiving traditions, Dan obviously mentioned that it was a little different this year, but at most Thanksgivings around this country, there's usually maybe a discussion at the table or something gets out of hand. Usually, maybe not not at all Thanksgivings, but they decided this year to televise two 50-year-olds fighting, not at Thanksgiving though, but on Saturday night, and it was Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. But as many people pointed out on Twitter, it was like two 50-year-olds at your Thanksgiving dinner, fighting about politics or sports or what have you. And I, like many foolish Americans, paid $50 to watch Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. I'm sure most my age or, watching this might have illegally streamed it, but they consumed it in some fashion. And to say it was unique, I think is an understatement. The word that I've been, thinking about just to describe this match, for me, it was a fever dream where it was like a nightmare almost, and you didn't know what you were watching, but you couldn't look away because it was, I think, entertaining. So not for just, I guess X's and O's boxing technique or the broadcast was amazing where I need to keep my eyes on it, but just because you didn't know what was going to happen next, almost like, watching a car crash or something, you had to keep your eyes glued to it. And it was the main event, Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., two 50-year-olds, by the way, two 50-year-olds, duking it out. And Mike Tyson and Jones Jr. fought to a draw, even though I think most of us and most everybody, and I know you guys, think that Mike Tyson won the fight. And then the undercard was headlined by Jake Paul, a YouTube star, versus Nate Robinson, a former NBA player, 10-year veteran, former New York Knick as well, who was donning the New York blue and orange and pretty much played like a Knick if you're out there and got knocked out in 2 rounds. But the main event was a draw. And again, a fever dream, I think, in terms of the actual fighting. But the broadcast was strange as well. It was broadcasted, or at least the sponsor and the production was done by Triller, which is a company that's a TikTok alternative. So I had no clue what that was. They were promoting that. The main sponsor of the fight, besides Mike Tyson maybe developing a Legends Fighting League, that was one of the sponsors, but it was something called Weed Maps, which is literally maps to find weed dispensaries. That was the main sponsor. That wasn't like, oh, they just put that, as one of 10 or something like that. That was the main sponsor. That's what the tail of the tape was presented by. That was crazy. And then you had in the booth,
California, baby.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
you have in the booth, right? Mauro Ranallo, a combat sports fighter, Israel Adenia, I probably botched that name, but a UFC fighter, and Sugar Ray Leonard, a boxer, right? They decide to add Snoop Dogg to the booth, and Snoop Dogg's just throwing expletives left and right, and I'm just like, is this real? He's just like, things I can't say here, or I don't want to say, because I don't want YouTube to take down our video. So, like, and that's what they were doing. And then the worst thing, I mentioned the broadcast and the quality, right? Triller decided to have these beautiful boxing graphics, which was just literally a white box with both the fighters' names. So when it was Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson, it just said Paul Robinson, which looked like it was a completely different guy and made no sense. But in the 8th round and I don't think people noticed this just because maybe they were enthralled with the fight. In the 8th round, the final round of the Tyson versus Jones Jr. fight, they had Ortiz Sagawa on their graphic, which was the opening fight of the card. They did, in the last round, it's the only time you have to get it important when people are going to highlight it. It didn't have Tyson or Jones Jr.'s name. And in the first round, it said 1 of 6. even though the fight was going 8, and then they later changed it. I don't know who greenlit this. I don't know why I couldn't just stay away and not watch this. But like the rest of the sports world, people were talking about it all night on Twitter, and it's carried into this morning. And I think we had a lead with it because it's the big sports story of the day. Guys, I know, Brennan, you watched. I know, Dan, you caught most of the social media reaction. So I'd like to get really both perspectives. Brennan, I'll start with you. I think you were wearing a Nate Robinson jersey. How did you think your boy? Yeah, how do you think your boy did?
So here's the deal.
Mm-hmm.
I did wear a Nate Robinson jersey.
Yes.
I did not have any thought that he was going to win that. Going in and boxing 1 year, compared to Jake Paul, who at this point does have one professional fight and is 1-0 and has been boxing for the last 3 years. I didn't think Robinson had a chance. But how many other situations are you going to have where you can wear a Nate Robinson jersey and have it be relevant to what is actually going on? That's the only reason there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as how the fight was, I mean, the best fights boxing-wise, and it makes sense because, professional boxers tend to have better fights, and especially when they're not 51 and 53 years old. The best fights were the 2 undercard fights, whether it be the lightweights. Those guys were throwing blows at each other. Which, I mean, they were featherweights, so you didn't really have the knockout power, but at the same time, it was fun to watch them actually connect on some punches, because after that, and after the second undercard, which I forget what weight class they were, but, 2 actual good boxers going at it. After that, it was just kind of people just swinging back and forth, other than either swinging back and forth or clinching for, every time someone tried to make a move. But no, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was fun to watch, especially when I didn't pay $50 for it. It's because I watched at a friend's house. That's why.
Sure.
It's the only reason why. But yeah, I mean, and when you look at the Paul Robinson fight, like, I think what had happened there was that Robinson probably was told by his trainers to get inside the reach of Jake Paul, probably try to fight from within. And stay outside of the arm length of Paul. But when he did that, of course, he got too close and ended up just locking up with Paul and having to be separated every time he tried to make a move, which eventually that didn't work out. And Paul landed one, and literally all it took was one punch, and Robinson was night and got slept on national television or on pay-per-view television. Yeah. So that was fun to watch. And I think the second fight, I mean, or the main card, it was like, obviously these guys aren't going to be fighting in their prime. Like, they're 50-something years old. We knew that. But I think a lot of people had forgotten that when they saw the names that were involved in it and kind of expected these two to try and knock each other out and go for a win in the first round. But, once they started, it kind of played out how you would expect two 50-year-olds to fight. Getting tired real early in rounds, not being able to swing full. And it made sense, afterwards. I think it was just awesome for, our generation to be able to watch two guys who were legends in their respective eras, whether it be the 80s, when Tyson was the world champion at the age of 20 years old, held the unanimous title for 3 years, or Jones Jr. in the 90s when he was one of the most dominant in the sport and a guy that knocked a lot of people out and had a lot of really good fights personally. So I think it was very cool to see those two kind of legends of the sport step into the ring, regardless of how old they are, to see two people who are the best at what they do be able to do it. I mean, and both of them would still knock any of us out. Talking about armchair quarterbacks, because we had a lot of armchair quarterbacking this weekend, whether it be with the fight, whether it be with Sarah Fuller being the first woman to kick in a Power 5 conference game in the NCAA. A lot of armchair quarterbacking going on, and I just want to put in perspective, those guys are legends, never going to be able to step into the ring, and it was just very fun to watch, and I think that's the point.
Yeah, they are legends, and I wish that they would remain out of the ring. I don't know why everyone's like, wow, they fought like 50-year-olds who hadn't fought in forever. Yeah. Like, why is that so shocking? I did not watch these events live because I didn't want to attend the funeral of boxing in person. I enjoy the sport, and I think it is so sad that someone said, how about we have a YouTuber and a former NBA player fight each other? Whose idea was that? Now we take, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., who obviously were tremendous boxers, and keep them out of the ring for years. And I love the hype that went into this with like watching Mike Tyson like throw punches in like some kind of training room, and everyone's like, "Whoa, Mike Tyson, he still got it." Well, he still got it with a T-shirt on and some random guy. He was not in a fighting situation. I look like an NBA player too if you gave me a little Tykes hoop. It's not that impressive. I was like, this is going to be really sad to watch, and it was. I guess there's a small part of me that wishes I bought it and watched it. I did have a little bit of experience with Triller when I interned with Radio Woodstock. That's what they used to make music videos. I did not use it personally, but they always talked about it, and I never heard of it. So when I heard they were doing the fight, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I don't know why. But unbelievable. And Nate Robinson losing the way he did in the Knicks colors is just one of the most poetic things I've ever seen. Makes for a really fun sports day to talk about for us, but for the sport of boxing, man, oof, that was rough.
Yeah, and you know what the sad thing is, and Dan, you mentioned that maybe people thinking that Tyson and Jones Jr. would the fight would look better, maybe. But my takeaway was that how bad Jones Jr. was, Tyson looked like sort of a professional out there. Like he looked like, whoa, he could maybe still hold his own, because Jones Jr. just looked so bad and was gassed after 2 rounds. Now, I think this is an interesting thing. This is right now the disclosed purses for the fight, so there's expected to be some more money for certain fighters, but this is what's been disclosed to the public, right? Tyson Jones Jr. $1 million each. Okay, Badu Jack $180K, McKernan $20K, and then the undercards ranging from $10,000 to $5,000. But apparently Jake Paul and Nate Robinson in the disclosed purses, and maybe this isn't factoring in some things, got only $600, which which is less than the PlayStation 5 is going for. So I don't know. Yeah. So
Nate Robinson got slept for everyone to watch. Had Michael Thomas saying that he has to give back his dunk contest award or award-winning trophies for $600.
Yeah, and I mean, there's probably, I guess, more money coming, but that was like the base thing, and then I guess, Paul and Robinson off merchandise, and I'm sure Tyson Jones Jr. are going to make a little more than $1 million as well, but just those, even like the bad undercard where it's like $5K, that looks a whole lot more than, and then $600, so, but yeah, so there you go, and poor Nate, I mean, he was always and not really poor Nate, but just, how he's going to get just destroyed on social media for the next coming days. He is a guy who, he's goofy in the locker room. Yeah, he's goofy in the locker room. He's well liked by NBA players in terms of, just who've played with him. And he was sort of in that generation that we grew up with where, when I first started watching the Knicks, Nate Robinson was on the team. But he's going to be remembered a long time for this fight and for just embarrassing himself on national TV because he had no technique. Yeah, there you go. And he's just going to get memed throughout. And he's not that he's an easy target, but he said that before the fight, he tweeted that he was going to have the NBA community on his back going into this fight and fight for his brothers and this and that. And he got embarrassed by who only has fought in previous, as Brennan mentioned, one professional fight. And Jake Paul, by the way, 2-0 with 2 knockouts. And then just to add more craziness, called out Conor McGregor along with various other people post-fight. So don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but he is undefeated with 2 knockouts. So I guess he's on the rise in the boxing world, right? But yeah, so just the clown show. I said it earlier, a fever dream, and I'm guessing most people watched it. So that's why we led with it today. And yeah, I'm glad you guys somewhat enjoyed it or took something out of it because I would have been a different emotion. Like we could laugh about it if it just crapped the bed and nothing was good from it. But not that it was a resounding success, but you could take some things from it. So yeah. So now we'll shift to.
I think the best part about it was Steph Curry. After after the fight, just absolutely burying Nate Robinson again. When Nate Robinson was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do something people have never seen," and Steph was like, "Yeah, you're right." As he's laying on the mat. I think that was the worst part.
I didn't understand.
And I'd love to see Jake Paul actually fight Conor McGregor.
Mm.
Brennan, I didn't understand why Steph went after Nate. Like, was there rivalry that I didn't know beforehand, or he just did that to do it? Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I really think that the entire NBA just decided that they were going to clown him. Like that fight alone, I think, set civil rights back like 40 years.
Jeez. Hey, you said it. Yeah, so it was something. It was something. Well, yeah, so Curry displeasure, you could find, I think ESPN even put out an article just highlighting some of the tweets of people destroying Nate Robinson for some reason, but they did. Yeah, but now we'll shift into, I guess, real sports, right? The Giants versus the Bengals, the New York team. The Giants today, if they win, will be first in the NFC East. Obviously, the Eagles play on Monday Night Football, and if they were to beat the Seattle Seahawks, they would be a half game over the Giants. But no matter what happens in that game, at least today, if the Giants take care of business, they'll be in first after the Washington football team beat the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. And for me, going into this Giants game, it's one, and it's been few in the last couple of years where the Giants are 6-point favorites, and I expect going into this game, the Giants to win. I root for the Giants to win every week. I try and wrap my mind around, if this happens, we could win, or if this thing or something like that. But in terms of just before the game, I fully believe that this is a game to win. But I think it does have the makings of a trap game. The Giants are taking on a Cincinnati Bengals team that has a lot of loaded receivers. T. Higgins, A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, a great receiving core. The Cincinnati Bengals lost Joe Burrow, their rookie quarterback, who's had a really, really good season before he tore his ACL and his MCL, and he's hoping to come back at the start of next year. So the Bengals are starting today Brandon Allen. Allen is starting his 4th career game. He started 3 previous last year in Denver, which we'll get to Denver's quarterback situation a little later in the show. But the Giants obviously don't have a lot of film on this guy. Cincinnati's offense does have a lot of weapons, and the Giants' cornerbacks probably the weakest part of their defense. So that's of concern just in terms of looking at this game. But if you're looking at other factors, and at least on the offensive side, Giants are taking on a Cincinnati Bengals team who's 30th in rush defense, which is 3rd worst. And Cincinnati obviously is coming off a devastating loss in terms of in the record books, but also, again, with losing Joe Burrow. So morale is probably low on Cincy. But another fact is that the Giants are coming off a bye. They beat Washington and Philly when they came off a bye. Now the Giants are coming off a bye, so you don't want to follow that trend either. And in this series, which is a unique one because Giants and Bengals really doesn't happen, it's not a yearly thing or every 2 years, it's every 4 years. Giants are 4-6 all time, which isn't great. And there's never been in the series history a team to win on the road. So a lot of things are going against them. And Daniel Jones, obviously he had maybe the game of his career versus Philly. Giants still have not beaten an AFC team and have not beaten a team outside of division besides the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Jones as their quarterback. So this is a game in which they're going to have to break a lot of bad history behind them, but first place is up for grabs. And as I mentioned, Giants -6 going into this game. They should be the favorites, but again, I think it's going to be closer than maybe that spread indicates. I'm hoping not, but I think it might be just because of, I think Cincinnati's offense is underrated. Not that they have a capable quarterback, but they have a quarterback maybe similar to last week with P.J. Walker, where the defense doesn't know what it's getting. So I don't know. I'm still full confidence in the Giants will win this game. There's a lot up for grabs. They'll definitely be my pick like they always are, and I think Brennan and Dan are likewise. But sort of a trap game feel where I think the Giants really have to get off to a good start in the first quarter. Brennan, do you have any thoughts on this, and Dan as well, in terms of my beliefs going into this game, or do you think it's one where I could finally relax?
No, I think you're right. I think, especially when you talk about the fact that yes, the Bengals are going into this game without a quarterback that they have a lot of confidence in, but on the same side, the Giants are going in not having a lot of film to study on him, and not really having a lot of they had the normal amount of time that they would usually have to study a quarterback like that, but at the same time, he's not the guy that you expect to be in there. So your game plan really only comes down to a week rather than what it would be for other teams where you can say, I'm playing the Packers this week. That means the weapons I'm facing are X, Y, and Z, Rodgers, Jones, and Adams. Like, you can't do that for the Bengals because, obviously they've got some turnover at key positions, especially quarterback and running back. I mean, the running back room has had a lot of injuries for Cincinnati this season, whether it be Giovanni Bernard or I almost just said Cedric Benson for a throwback part. But no, not Cedric Benson. But then, that you talk about the wide receivers as well. Obviously, that is the strongest point on their team. But if the offensive line can't hold back the Giants' defense, which I think is a strength for them, then it doesn't matter at that point. If you can still get to the quarterback, like we have seen teams be able to do against the Bengals all season, I think that's a bigger indication of how the game's going to go than how many weapons a team has in their offense.
Yeah, the Giants should win today. I mean, obviously Joe Burrow is out, very unfortunately, and so that should that's a big part of it. If you don't have a quarterback that's good, you're really going to struggle. As far as how confident you should be, I feel like you should ask yourself, and remember, kids, sports betting is illegal in some states, so don't do it. But how much money are you willing to put on your team to win? If it's a lot, well, you should be confident. If not, well, who knows? Giants Reddit is not helpful today. One of the questions is what happened to Hakeem Nicks. I know you can just Google that. I don't know why you put that on Reddit. There's most of the things today you can just Google. So unfortunately, the internet is not very helpful in this discussion for myself today.
Thanks, Dan. And Brennan touched on the offensive line for Cincy. And I want to touch on the offensive line for the Giants because, as we talked about on last week's show, Mark Colombo, the offensive line coach, getting fired after an argument with Joe Judge.
The head coach in the face.
No, there was no fight. Again, no fight. It never got violent, no matter what. Some national NFL reporters. It was just his
nose.
No, it was just a altercation in terms of words and not violence. But yeah, the Giants' offensive line is going to have to. They've had the bye to compose themselves, and the offensive line room, shifted without their coach. But not that since he has any amazing pass rushers, but the Giants, for every game this year, have not had a game in which they've allowed 0 sacks. They've at least allowed 1. So you would think, they want to get on the right path today. And again, if this is close, you don't want to give up 2 to 3 sacks late in the game. You want to play well. And I think there's a lot, not pressure, but the offensive line knows, hey, they just fired the coach. Obviously, we're under, pressure in terms of strain and the personnel around on the defense, and as well as Joe Judge is targeting us as the weak point of this team, we have to play better. So, yeah, and some inactives and actives we're going to give him later in the show. Brennan will run down after he gets, his sources texting him, of course. But yeah, of course. So for the Giants, Graham Gano, the kicker, is back. He had COVID during the bye week, but he will play today. Tight end Caden Smith, offensive tackle Matt Pert, and wide receiver Dante Pettis are out. Not a huge blow. Caden Smith is used in some formations, but is not their number 1 tight end. So Toilolo will be the number 2 tight end. And, of course, Evan Ingram is your usual starter. But nothing besides those names that I listed are notable inactives or actives for the Giants. And, again, as we go later into the show, we'll give you our inactives and actives for teams around the league, and including the Jets, which I'm sure will have a lot of inactives like they always do. But Sam Darnold is going to play, so that's something we can talk about. But now we're going to shift into the NFL as a whole, and really the main story, which is COVID. You have 2 main stories. I think one that is just terrible and could be the writing on the wall for the NFL or something they have to address immediately. And then the other is, I wouldn't say goofy because there's still COVID involved, but the fact that it's happening is sort of nuts. So we start with the Ravens, whose game has been postponed twice. It was originally supposed to be on Thanksgiving, got postponed till Sunday today at 1:15, and then got postponed again to Tuesday. So Ravens Steelers will be Tuesday, and the Ravens will be without 22 players. That's right, 22. That is 11 on offense and 11 on defense. It's not all the starters, but you could literally start their COVID team. And so 22 players on the COVID/reserve list. Notable names include Lamar Jackson, their quarterback, running back Mark Ingram, starting tight end Mark Andrews, starting tackle Matthew Judon, Calais Campbell, one of their pass rushers, and everyone's favorite quarterback, and especially on TikTok and maybe Trace McSorley, who is on the COVID list as well. And Brennan, great song if you could look up the Trace McSorley song. But so the Ravens, if Lamar and McSorley are no-go, will have to start Robert Griffin III on Tuesday. But at least RG3's a capable quarterback, or he used to be, right? For the Broncos today, because their quarterback room got infected with COVID, they're going to have to start Kendall Hinton. If you don't know that name, don't worry, because I didn't either until 2 hours ago when I researched who he was. Kendall Hinton was an undrafted free agent this year and was a receiver coming out of Wake Forest. He originally at Wake Forest was a backup quarterback and got a couple of snaps, including a couple snaps in the Wildcat formation with the capability to throw against Notre Dame back a couple of years ago. He will start today for the Denver Broncos against the Saints. 3-star recruit in high school, backup quarterback, as I mentioned, at Wake Forest, and then shifted to his receiver later on in his tenure there. Has not thrown a pass since 2018 in any NFL game. So there's that. He worked a sales job for the month of September because he was cut originally by the Broncos and then brought on when they, sustained some injuries and COVID. So this guy is starting a quarterback today, November 29th. The Broncos, are pretty much out of it, not mathematically eliminated, but pretty much out of it in the postseason. But the Broncos, who had 4 quarterbacks on their roster, all a no-go, and they have to start a guy who finished off, as a receiver in college named Kendall Hinton, who was working a sales job in September. Not great for quality of play for the NFL on both counts. You have Ravens Steelers, which on Thanksgiving was supposed to be the marquee game, get postponed twice, not a good look. And the Saints pretty much have a bye week this week. They do. It's now a 15.5-point spread, and they're so heavily favored that a lot of sports books pulled the game from betting. They just said, you can't do it. Oh, there we go. That's the Trace McSorley song. I thought Brennan just left something on. I was like, what the heck is that? Yeah, great song. But yeah, and McSorley.
Trace McSorley.
Yeah, they're going to have to edit that lyric because he has COVID now. So maybe add that in there. But yeah. Yeah, so there you go. 22 Ravens. And Dan, I'll get your reaction first. I don't know. And again, it's not in the nail in the coffin for the NFL. I think they're going to keep pushing forward. But how many weeks could you go with a game being postponed till Tuesday, marquee quarterbacks not playing because of COVID? Eventually, it's going to take its toll. And you, as the NFL, which is supposed to be, and is the most popular league in this country and has a lot of money and revenue each year, unlike the other sports leagues, they're limping towards the finish line or towards the playoffs.
Yeah, I spoke with a Park professor a few weeks ago who works closely with the NFL, and I'm sure you guys can guess who this is.
Yeah. But
the phone with her, and they said, "How many students are you going to send to the Super Bowl?" And she said, "What Super Bowl? You guys are not going to make it to the Super Bowl. Like it's really not looking good for them." I think we've been saying it all along. We kind of knew that we're going to have to live with the virus in sports as long as it's around. I don't know how this is sustainable. Obviously it's not, with everyone in the Ravens having it. It's a major issue. We don't know the long-term implications of this virus, and yet we're still sending college kids out to play. It's a disaster, but it is. It's just a complete disaster, and we're gonna have to live with it as sports fans for now. But as a side note, Trace McSorley song by Matty Fresh. Is that who wrote that? I know Matty Fresh. He interned for the Stallions, my hometown baseball team, and I met him. He's a really cool guy. And he was the DJ for my hometown baseball team 3 years ago. He's a really cool dude.
Wow.
And he's a musical dude as well, obviously.
See, these are the connections you find nowhere else.
Right? Apparently he also has a Saquon Barkley official song that I've never heard.
Yes, he did. I remember he played that for us before he released it at the stadium one day. The fans were so confused; they did not understand. We were listening to a song about Saquon Barkley in July at a big.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that was before he was a Giant, I would think, right, when they wrote that song.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So he's just a running back from Penn State. So there you go. Yeah. I don't even know what to say. Brennan, do you have any thoughts before we transition into college football and maybe talk some Penn State? We'll see.
I mean, we talked about it in the podcast a lot earlier, and the fact that it's something that at this point I think we're undervaluing a little bit. We talked about it in the scope of college basketball, how there were 13 games canceled on that Friday.
Yeah.
Where if the game were to be canceled because for a reason like this a year ago, it would be front page news, and now we just kind of stick it to the wayside like it's not really that big of a deal. I think we still should treat things like they are big deals, even though we are kind of used to it or at this point desensitized to what is actually going on. I think it's important to keep things in perspective, which I think we're lacking to do at this point. Also, just quickly, on the football side, I just think it's interesting that any game with a team that is, in playoff contention, they're going to move to a Tuesday. But hey, if the Broncos don't have any quarterbacks, now you're still going to play, and you might have to forfeit, and you definitely can't sign that practice or not that practice squad, that assistant coach you have who knows your system and who may have a chance to be able to actually play quarterback for you. But hey, what are you going to do? The NFL's got to make their money somehow.
Well, that's the great rule too with just the Broncos. You have the 4 quarterbacks, as we mentioned, can't go because of COVID and the restrictions behind it, but they can't bring in a free agent either because they would have to pass COVID protocol and get into, I guess, the system or something, and there wasn't enough time. So they couldn't even get an emergency free agent, or find somebody. And not that they want to take on another quarterback, but I think they want to do a little better than Kendall Hinton, and that's no knock at Hinton. I mean, he's a receiver on their roster. He's not a quarterback. So, again, it'll be interesting to see, and it's sort of a precursor to our NFL picks, which happened 12:50 right before kickoff. But the Saints I have with a valuable pick, and Brennan Dan allowed me to keep it even with the quarterback change, and I appreciate it. So, so yeah. But, we'll transition now into college football. It was another great slate of games in the college football world, and I know Brennan had his heart broken again by the Syracuse Orange, which we'll get into, but we'll start with the teams that actually are good at football. Number 1, Alabama destroyed Auburn 35-6, won the Iron Bowl. Clemson defeated Pitt by a huge margin. Ohio State, Illinois. Ohio State is 4th ranked and Clemson is 3rd. Ohio State, Illinois was supposed to happen, but canceled due to COVID. Not going to be rescheduled, not postponed, canceled. Just not going to happen. So Ohio State, even more so because the Big Ten have less games than other conferences because they started later, will have one less more because Illinois, they won't be able to reschedule. At least right now it's canceled. Maybe that could change, but right now not going to happen. Another team that could have made the college football playoff in the Big Ten, had enough games to at least. Number 8 Northwestern was upset by Michigan State 29-20, a bad loss for them. And do I think that they would have beaten Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game? No, but at least they went in undefeated. It would have been a great storyline. And if they did pull the upset, they would have been in the college football playoff. Now with the one loss, it would I would take some things that happened in their division, and then to play Ohio State and then to beat them, and then the college football playoff to sort of, I guess, take away that Michigan State loss or not value it as such and realize that they beat Ohio State with one loss. But definitely hurts Northwestern's resume. It was a great run while it lasted for them. Not, known as a Big Ten powerhouse, but, in the top 10 and suffered a loss against an unranked Michigan State team that lost against Rutgers this season. Penn State, as we mentioned with Saquon, they got their first win of the season, beat Michigan 27-17. I think that's just more of a knock on Michigan than a success for Penn State. I don't know what Harbaugh's doing there. I don't know if the hot seat could get any hotter for Jim Harbaugh because, I know it's a unique season and they lost a couple good players to the NFL from last year, but Michigan is a 5-star, recruits every single year. They should be better than their record is. And the same thing goes for Penn State, but Michigan has championship expectations every year, while Penn State sometimes does and sometimes doesn't. And, Both have been disappointments this year, but Penn State finally notched a win on the win column, and I believe are 1-6 this season. But hey, they have their win. Rutgers, a win against the Purdue Boilermakers, a 7-point victory. They won 37-30. Hey, good for Greg Schiano. A win versus Purdue and a win versus Michigan State. You go back last year, and they couldn't even contend against most Big Ten teams. They have now 2 conference wins. It's not going to put them in a bowl or anything like that. Lost NC State, dropped to 1-9, and have lost 7 straight games. What are your thoughts on the Syracuse Orange disappointing? I know you were red hot after the game, but your thoughts looking back a day after.
All right. Where do I even start? Really? I mean, our most productive offensive play was a kick return. That's really the biggest issue, I think. They just have no way to move the ball on offense. I mean, yeah, they scored a lot of points, but at the same time, like, they didn't do it very effectively. The defense, Syracuse leading the country in turnovers. Like, they have caused more turnovers than any other team in the country. And usually, it's one of those statistics that usually when you look at it and look at the turnover margin, which they are, again, number 1 in the country, and that proves how good teams can be. But it just doesn't. And at this point, they cause a lot of turnovers. I think if Rex Culpepper doesn't, spike the ball on 4th down with 1 second left, then we talk about the North Carolina State quarterback who threw the ball out of the back of the end zone for a safety. Just for S&Gs, like, why not? Just tuck it. You're going the wrong way anyway. I don't know. It was just ridiculous. And the funny part is my brother who watches the show, he says on this drive, they get inside the 20, they get inside the 10, and he goes, it's going to come down to a spike here. And of course, with 9 seconds, he runs around, gets sacked, goes to the line, 4th down, doesn't decide to run a play, which the receivers didn't run routes anyway. So I don't think he would have had an opportunity to actually throw the ball anywhere because everyone on the offense lined up for a spike. So I really don't think you can put all the blame on Rex Culpepper, but at the same time, he's the quarterback. So yeah, you kind of have to. He's just the face of it. But it's just ridiculous at this point. I mean, they're a team that should be, not winning games. I said it last week. We don't have a quarterback. I mean, at this point, we weren't winning games with Tommy DeVito anyway. But at the same time, he is your 4-star New Jersey product quarterback who you kind of expected to be a guy to lead your team into a few wins. I mean, you were ranked at the end of 2 years ago. Like, you're a team that should probably be winning games. And just to watch them lose, especially in that fashion where they had a chance to tie the game, send it in overtime, and then, making one of the biggest blunders in college football, not just this week, but this year. It was just painful. It really was. And at this point, all I can do is laugh. Like, obviously, we're not going to a bowl game. I mean, that's just how it works. Every team is eligible this year, still not going to get a bowl game. Obviously, it's not good to lose on national television. I know it was national television, but the ACC network, it was just painful. It really was. All you can do is laugh at this point because it's a circus, absolute circus.
There you go, Syracuse perspective from Brennan Miller. And you mentioned may not even get a bowl invite, and they especially won't get one because we found out pre-production. There's no Pinstripe Bowl this year, which broke my heart. I did not know that was canceled until Brennan brought it to my attention, and along with a couple of other bowls, just due to COVID or state laws saying, hey, let's not have this game or what have you. But Pinstripe Bowl not happening at Yankee Stadium. It's always my favorite in bowl season. It's right between Christmas and New Year's, around like December 28th, 29th. But not happening this year, so not an option for Syracuse. It could have been a Syracuse-Rutgers game because it's Big Ten versus ACC every year. Those are the two teams. It's always like that. That's what's contracted, but not going to be the case this year probably. And if if it is on another bowl game, I don't think it's going to have the same feeling, I guess. But yeah, there you go with the college football roundup. Dan, anything you want to add in terms of college football? Not. Yeah.
I am. I have some neighbors that are big Syracuse fans. And a few days ago, I was raking some leaves, and they walked by, and they're like, "Well, basketball season's coming." I said, "Hey, that's a positive. They got to win. Joe Girard's looking good.
Yeah.
That's all you can ask with the Orange.
Sure. You always got their basketball school looking towards the basketball season, which did begin, by the way, this past week, and maybe next week we'll give a little opinion on it. But number 4, Virginia, was the big takeaway, them losing to San Francisco, already a top 10 team, falling in college basketball. And it's going to be unique from a COVID perspective, which Brennan touched on earlier. Their success without a bubble format and just teams across the country, how it's going to unfold. But we will see as time goes on. Now we will shift into our MVPs of the week. It's a segment in which we look at someone who's had a great week, and it could be within sports, pop culture, anything. There was, I guess, a lot of options this week. I don't know. I thought about mine. Usually I go with a media direction. Was definitely not going with the media coverage of Jones Jr. versus Tyson. That is not my MVP. Instead, I actually decided to look on the field and find a player who had a great week, and it was Jaret Patterson of Buffalo. Yesterday, he ran 36 times for 409 yards and 8 touchdowns against Kent State. The game was a 70-41 victory for Buffalo, and some great action at the 12 o'clock window. And to say that that's video games numbers is an understatement. I don't know if a created player in the old college football games could have a game like that. That was unbelievable. It was better than me on Thanksgiving against my little cousins. Not that much better, but still better.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was gonna say, I don't know. You had a pretty solid game.
Yeah. So but that's how great of a day Jaret Patterson had for Buffalo. Action, of course, never gonna get the Power 5 look, and especially this year because of the late start, won't play a lot of games. But Jaret Patterson showed up and showed out for Buffalo. He's my MVP of the week because give me another running back who's gone 409 yards and 8 touchdowns and not in a D2 or D3 or FCS. This was an FBS Division I game, and Buffalo's offense put up 70 points, 8 of those 7, or 8 times 7, 56 of those 70 going to Jaret Patterson. That's why he is my MVP of the week. Brennan, who was your MVP of the week for this week? Maybe it was the golf tournament, Bleacher Report. Maybe it was Jones Jr. fight. A lot of options. I'm interested to see where you go.
There are a lot of options. Initially, it would have been Phil Mickelson or Peyton Manning for just absolutely not allowing Charles Barkley to be comfortable at all during the match. And I feel like that would have been a very good one. Also, my favorite part of that entire thing was Chuck giving away snacks on the first 9 and then complaining about the fact he didn't have any snacks left on the back 9. I just didn't fat for him at that point. But no, my MVP of the week, I'm also going to go to the college football gridiron. Mine is going to be a player who has only played in one game, but she made history in that game, and it's going to be Sarah Fuller. The kicker for Vanderbilt kicked off to open the second half in Vanderbilt's game against Missouri. It was a pooch kick, a designed kick. A lot of people are saying, oh, I could get a D1 scholarship for this. No, you couldn't. You absolutely could not. That was a great kick, didn't allow a return. And she becomes the first woman to ever play in a Power 5 conference game. My favorite part about that is that it literally was the best solution for Vanderbilt. It was not a publicity stunt. Their entire special teams room came down with close contact COVID cases, other than their punter. It's the only reason they didn't have to grab the backup goalie from the soccer team as well. Vanderbilt does not have a men's soccer team that they could have gone to get a player from. And the Vanderbilt women's season had just ended with she just won the SEC championship in women's soccer. So she was the best option. Literally went to all the head football coach went to all the coaches that were still playing fall sports and said, who do you think our best option would be to grab someone who can kick for us? And of course, it's Sarah Fuller. She's able to make history, and it's just a very important step, in this football landscape, especially in the Power 5 landscape of being able to have a woman kicking off in a premier SEC game. It's awesome.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. And Sarah Fuller gets my co-MVP this week. Very interesting opportunity and a great one, by the way. Again, there's so many great choices. I want to make it whoever made this meme of Nate Robinson sleeping in a Minecraft bed. That's just, that's pretty brutal. There's the mattress. I could do this all day. But instead, I think I know exactly what I'm going to go with. I chanced it. I chanced this, and I went out on a limb, and it paid off. My MVP this week, you're not going to expect this, is Ian Flanagan on The Voice, because he is from Saugerties, New York, and he is on Team Blake. He won last week. I didn't make him my MVP because I wanted him to win again, and he did. Now, if you know me, I am not a country music fan, but being on Team Blake, I gotta support my man. So if you drive anywhere through this town, you will see people with "I Heart Ian Flanagan" signs in their yards. It's become a town event. Ian, keep going, man. Awesome that you're on NBC and singing with Blake Shelton. It's pretty cool. That's my MVP this week.
So there you go. And I mentioned at the top, it comes from sports, pop culture, entertainment, and Dan deciding to go with the hometown boy on The Voice. Hey, it's better singing than on The Masked Singer, right? On The Voice, and good for him instead of some dumb celebrity in a mask, right? There you go. So those are MVP of the week. If all over the place in terms of where we decide to go, but that's where we went, and I didn't even know that. That's definitely an interesting story. Not that I will look into it all, but definitely very interesting. Brennan, do you have NFL inactives and actives to give us? I'm gonna try and find the Jets one specifically just for the local perspective. I know there's some national players that are a surprise. I know Julio Jones is one inactive that's came down, but do you have your sources contacting you around the league that are giving you a full list?
Absolutely. Every single one of them.
Sure.
An exec from every team actually has already sent me a list.
Wow.
So looking at the early Week 12 actives and actives, active for the first time since Week 1, stepping onto the field for I almost said San Diego, but the Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler is back, and he is in my starting fantasy lineup. Along with him, a former teammate, Philip Rivers, is active for the Colts. Gio Bernard active for the Bengals, so a little bit of bad news there for you, John, but Gio Bernard will play. Hayden Hurst active, Jakeem Grant active, and Zach Pascal for the Colts active as well. As far as inactives, big wide receivers, Julio Jones and Adam Thielen both out. Tua will not play, so their running back room gets thinner and thinner as each day passes. Kalen Ballage inactive, and Gardner Minshew will not play, so we will not get the pleasure of watching him throw a football. That's it for the early ones.
There you go, and some inactives for the Jets. Brennan mentioned with the Dolphins, but George Font for the Jets offensive line, he is inactive, and besides that, no one of note. So inactives for that game. And Jets-Miami is in the 1 o'clock window, along with the New York Giants versus Cincinnati Bengals. As you go later into the season, they tend to pair up the local teams, mainly because they're just not marquee primetime matchups or get flexed to that position. So they always slot them at the 1 o'clock window, which for some local fans who want to see both is not great. It never used to happen back in the day, but now, because of the flexing opportunities with primetime games, and I guess just, with COVID, you don't want to take any chances with rescheduling, or if you're going to reschedule a game like they did with the Ravens Steelers, you want it to be a marquee matchup. All right, so this shifts us into our NFL game picks for Week 12. Just before we go into it, an update on the standings. You have Brennan atop with 112 points, Dan with 109, and I have 100, slowly climbing, slowly getting there, and closing the margin, if you will. In terms of the record overall, and again, we pick the winner and loser of the game. We give you the spread for full context, but we pick the winner of the game, and that's where we get the point. You get 1 point for a normal game, and if it's a lock, an upset, or our game of the week pick, it is worth 2. But the overall record, Brendan is 96-55. Dan is 95-56. I am 85-66 on the season. Again, you chalk that up to 7 Giants losses. Slot those in as wins, and I'm a little closer. But I always, you pick your team. We will start, I think, with the game of the week before we go into our lock and upset. There's a lot of good games this week. Maybe some would think it was Ravens-Steelers, but just because of the nature of the COVID around that game and it not being what it should be if everything was normal, we're deciding to go with Chiefs versus Buccaneers. It's the 4 o'clock game. Mahomes versus Brady. Kansas City, a 3.5-point favorite that game on Fox. I'm going with the Chiefs, and it's simple. The Bucs just keep letting me down when I pick them. I picked them last week when they were on Monday Night Football against the Rams. Brady and this offense feels one-dimensional where they have deep threats, but that's all they could do. The run game was non-existent against the Rams, even though they do have two good running backs, and Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette just can't seem to get them going. Trying to use them in the pass game when they're really not great pass catchers, especially not Leonard Fournette. They had multiple opportunities to win that Rams game. The Rams kept the Bucs in it forever. And eventually Brady, had a fourth quarter drive down 7 with a minute to go and just couldn't convert a third down through an interception. And the Buccaneers lost. And I know the Chiefs' defenses look shaky. They're maybe not the dominant force that they were last year coming off their Super Bowl. But even on the road and only favored by 3.5, I think this is going to be a Chiefs win, more by that 3.5. And again, I'll take Mahomes over a 40-year-old Brady any day of the week. Brennan, you agree, Chiefs versus Buccaneers.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but just real quickly, I want to do a quick hockey dump. The man who broke my heart last week, Julian Blackman, has entered the stadium for the Colts wearing a Mighty Ducks jersey, which is quite possibly the coolest thing I've seen in a long time. Along with that, both the starting defensive pair for the San Jose Sharks, Brett Burns and Evander Kane, have both challenged Jake Paul to a fight. So just want to throw that out there before we get to it. But I would love to see some hockey enforcers start throwing down in the ring. So as far as, back to football, what we're here talking about, I also went with the Chiefs. I think that they're just a very, very good football team, and at this point look like the favorites to come out of the AFC for the Super Bowl. I think Patrick Mahomes is just playing on a whole nother level. I get it. Like the matchup between Brady and Mahomes is supposed to be this big thing. But I think at this point in their career, Mahomes is just a lot better than Tom Brady is. And I don't think that it should be as big of a storyline as it really is, because I think there's a clear line of discrepancy between the quality of play between both those quarterbacks. And I think that plays a huge role in the Chiefs being able to get a win today.
Yeah, I mean, take the Chiefs, kids. It's a smart pick. The Bucs, just not as consistent as the Chiefs. Overall, a much better team.
So there you go, our game of the week picks and our game of the week record. Brendan and I are both 6-5, and Dan is 4-7 when we pick our game of the week. Now we'll shift into our locks, and it was interesting for me because on the podcast, which we record on Saturdays and then airs on Sundays 11:30 a.m. on VIC Radio, I went with the Saints because they were 7-point favorites at the time, and I just, not even knowing the Broncos quarterback situation, thought Saints will get, take care of business. Brendan and Dan have allowed me to keep the Saints as my lock. Saints are 15.5-point favorites, so maybe be wary of that line. But if you don't think the Saints are, not going to win this game outright, I don't know what to say. The Broncos are starting a receiver at quarterback. Again, no knock on him, but he should not be in that position. It's because 4 quarterbacks in the room cannot go because of COVID. So the Saints are my lock. Brennan, you're going to Monday Night Football for yours.
Yeah, my lock is going to be the Seattle Seahawks, against the Philadelphia Eagles. I think for me, this plays more to the fact that the Seahawks are a better team, or that the Eagles are a worse team than the Seahawks by far. I think that 6 points is a generous spread. I think the Eagles are not a very good team, obviously playing in the NFC East. They've got a few wins, but also it's still the NFC East, and it's still the Philadelphia Eagles. They've been plagued with injuries at this point through the season. I get it. The Seahawks pass defense is the worst in NFL history, but they're still winning games. And really, when it comes down to it, that's all that matters. So I'm going with the Seahawks over the Eagles. It's a 6-point spread, but I think that they cover.
As far as my lock of the week goes, I'm taking the Rams. This Google search I just did is telling me the Rams and the Seahawks are tied for first in the NFC West at 7-3, meaning that they both need this game. I think that the Seahawks are also a good pick because the Eagles smell and the Seahawks need to win. I think the Rams also need to win this one. And they're playing the Niners. Niners are 4-6. I think that because they need it so bad, they're going to take the win today.
So there you go, our locks for NFL Week 12. Record for that, I'm 6-5. Brendan and Dan are 7-4. I've hit 3 in a row. Probably will hit 4 in a row as well. But on a hot streak, as they say, after starting very bad. We'll go into our upsets before we run down the rest of the NFL Week 12. An upset I have, and this is a close spread, so, maybe some pick'ems for some people, but it's Arizona -1 for us, and that's Cardinals versus the Patriots. Patriots are at home against the Cardinals. It's, again, I know Kyler's had a great season, but a young quarterback Belichick and his defense. I don't think the Patriots, I know they aren't the Patriots of yesteryear, but I don't think they're going to go out without a bang towards the end of the season. I think they're going to try and make it tough for teams that are vying for a playoff spot, and the Arizona Cardinals in that NFC West that we just mentioned are contending for a playoff spot as well. So I'm going with the Patriots as my upset. Brennan and Dan both disagree going with the Cardinals, but I'm taking Belichick at home. It's at Gillette Stadium, and I picked the Patriots at home last week against the Texans, thinking they were at home. I made a typo in the Google sheet, and it burned me. That game was in Houston, and then Houston won. I triple checked that it was at Gillette. It is, and that's the reason that the Patriots will edge out the Cardinals. Brennan, you're upset for NFL Week 12.
Yeah, I'm going to pick a team I absolutely disrespected last week, and I'll admit that I was wrong. I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. They're going to take down the Minnesota Vikings. Again, the Vikings lost to the Cowboys last week. It plays a lot into the fact that I don't think the Vikings, are as good as they have their record indicates. So I'm going to go with the Panthers, a team that has proven to be just outside of the realm of making the playoffs, but can take down the big teams if they need to. They kind of play to their competition. But yeah, that's what I'm going with. Dan, you're up.
I'm taking the Panthers too, kind of because you took the Panthers, and I just don't like any other of these picks as upsets. I mean, I'm going to take the Jets. I thought about it, but I didn't do it. I mean, Nate Robinson might as well have worn Jets colors yesterday. I'm just going to say it. I know that's uncalled for. Yeah. I took the Panthers because Brennan is, and I don't like any of the other ones.
So there you go. Brennan and Dan both going the same with the Carolina Panthers against the Minnesota Vikings, and I had the Patriots as my upset. We're all 3-8 across the board on our upsets. It's been the weak spot in terms of trying to get that 2 points. But now we will shift into the rest of the NFL Week 12 slate. There was obviously 2 games that happened on Thanksgiving, but no teams on the bye this week, so a lot of games to watch today. And Dan, we start with the Titans versus the Colts in an AFC South battle.
Titans-Colts, a much more yummy matchup than anything you saw on Thanksgiving. I almost lost my appetite. All 3 of us have the Colts. They are at home. They are favored by 3 over the Titans, who are really slipping. Next game is the Raiders and the Falcons. Raiders favored by 3 on the road. John has the Falcons. Brendan and I have the Raiders. Again, should be a close matchup by all accounts. Next, we have the Chargers and the Bills. I have the Bills. John has the Bills. Brennan has the Chargers. Bills are going to be angry people. They lost to DeAndre Hopkins that last second thing 2 weeks ago. For that reason, I think you can expect the Bills to win. If they don't, I'm going to be upset. And then there's the Dolphins and the Jets. All 3 of us have the Dolphins because we're not going to take the Jets. That's all I have for that game.
Next up, Browns versus Jaguars. Cleveland's favored by 7.5. I already said Gardner Minshew wasn't going to play, but I don't really think it plays that big of an impact. All 3 of us have the Browns. Well, 2 of us have the Browns. Dan specifically put the Brownies, which, again, I'm all for. But all 3 of us picking the same team in that one. Next game, Patriots versus Cardinals. We already talked about it. Cardinals favored by 1 point over the Patriots. Dan and I both going with the Cardinals. John made it his upset of the week, but I think that the offense, especially led by Kyler Murray, who is a low-key MVP contender, is going to be able to put up a lot of points on the Patriots defense.
Next game up is Panthers versus Vikings, and we mentioned that Brennan and Dan both have the Panthers as their upset. I'm going with the Vikings, and they're favored by 3 points, and I just think that Dalvin Cook is going to run all over this Carolina Panthers defense. The Panthers are again without Christian McCaffrey, and I think that plays a huge role, so I have the Vikings. Next game up, Giants versus the Bengals. We talked about how it might be a potential trap game for the Giants. The key is getting off to a good start. I think they will. Brennan and Dan agree with the Giants pick. Giants across the board, and that completes the 1 o'clock window. Now we go into the 4 o'clock window, Saints-Broncos. As I mentioned, my lock. Of course, Brennan and Dan have the Saints as well. They're minus 15.5 right now. In some books, you can't even bet them. And now, Brennan, 49ers versus the Rams.
I'm going with the Rams. So is everyone else. Dan made it his lock of the week. I like the Rams. I think that they're a good team. Obviously, first place, tied for first place in the NFC West with those Seahawks that I made my lock earlier. But all 3 of us think that the Rams are going to be able to take down the injury-plagued 49ers.
Yep, Chiefs-Broncos, game of the week. Chiefs across the board. Brennan, your Packers, Sunday Night Football, 8-point favorites against the Bears. You obviously are going Packers, so are we. Do you have any conviction of why it'll be an easy Green Bay W?
Aaron Rodgers playing at an MVP level. He's probably top 2 in the MVP race at this point. I think he continues that against his Bears team that, while they were good at the beginning of the year, have proven that it's tough for them to win games when they have to play any kind of competition.
Seahawks versus Eagles, Monday Night Football. Seahawks are Brennan's lock, and me and Dan have the Seahawks as well.